Thank you very much. I think there are still a few people coming into the room, but apart from that, I think we can start. So thanks already very much to everybody for coming to this very interesting session on growth by export, new tools for international trade. This is, in my opinion, a very timely discussion. We've had quite a lot of mentions already in this assembly of the Draghi report, which of course has focused particularly on the questions of the EU economy's competitiveness and productivity. And certainly one of the central avenues for many companies to grow and to become more productive is by being able to sell your goods and services to other countries. However, what we've also seen, particularly when we compare SMEs to large enterprises, that SMEs still lag behind large enterprises when it comes to export. On the other hand, what we've also seen is that for a lot of companies, particularly those small enterprises that are scaling up and creating growth, that the EU single market is one of the key export markets for them and is central to facilitating their growth. For example, when we look at scale-ups, more than 30% of scale-ups in the EU export to other EU countries, compared to only about 12% that export outside the EU. So it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this session, and in particular, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of our distinguished panelists for this session. So I'm going to introduce the panelists briefly, and then I'll say a few practical details about the Slido and how to ask questions, and about the order of the presentations. But first, let me welcome my distinguished fellow panelists here. So thank you very much for joining. We have Anne Lanigan, who is the president of Trade Promotion Europe and is currently the divisional manager for Enterprise Ireland's Technology and Services Division. She's based in Dublin and joined Enterprise Ireland in 2003 and has held a number of management positions, including director of the Tokyo office, head of the Brexit unit, and more recently the regional director for Europe when she was based in Amsterdam. Next to her, we have Marco Forgione, who's the Director General of the Institute of Export and International Trade since January 2020. He is a key intermediator between governments and businesses, both domestically and overseas. He is sitting on the Critical Imports Council in the UK and on the multilateral B20 Task Force for Trade and Investment. He is also a visiting professor at Aston University and regularly comments on trade and supply chain matters in the international media. Next, we have Adrienne Berta, who is the Deputy CEO of Exim Hungary. She brings over a decade of expertise in executive banking, and she has specialized in corporate finance and strategic management. Currently, she leads Exim's business division and holds board positions across key financial institutions. And our final speaker will be Natalia Petrovova, who is the mandate officer at the European Investment Fund, which is a specialist provider of risk finance for SMEs across Europe. Natalia primarily works on debt instruments under the InvestEU mandate, which supports sustainable investment, innovation, and job creation across Europe. And this also includes the development and the deployment of the export credit pilot, which has been launched in July this year, and which she will present in this session today. So thanks very much already for everyone for agreeing to speak. I'm sure we will have a very interesting discussion on this very interesting topic. So the workshop will start. I will give each of you the floor for 5 minutes. Please stick to the time because we have a fairly strict timetable. I will tell you once your 5 minutes are up. And after that, we will have a moderated Q&A session. All of the audience members are welcome to submit your questions through Slido, which I believe there will be a link to the Slido. Exactly, there is a link on to Slido on the screen. So I would ask all of the audience members, if you have any questions, please submit them through Slido, and I will pick and choose depending on how many questions we get. If there are no questions from the audience, I will ask a couple of questions to the panelists myself. But now, without any further ado, let's hear from the panelists. So I would like very much to pass the floor to Anne Lanigan, who will present to us how SMEs are doing when it comes to international trade. So Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marcus. Anne Lanigan is my name, and I'm president of Trade Promotion Europe. Trade Promotion Europe is an association of European trade promotion organisations and agri-food promotion organisations. Our 32 members work with exporting companies every day of the week. And although they work with companies at all stages of developments and at every size, they have a particular focus on SMEs. And I myself, as Marcus has said, work for Enterprise Ireland. I'm on the senior management team of Enterprise Ireland, which is the Irish trade promotion organisation. So just first of all, to say a couple of things about SMEs. Most SMEs don't export. They are domestic focused and provide services and products to domestically. What we're talking about here today is exporting SMEs, and that's actually quite a small percentage of SMEs. I also think it's really important to distinguish between the S and the M. So the vast majority of SMEs are actually S's. They're small. That means they have less than 50 people. And remember, life is a lot more challenging for those companies. SMEs succeed because of their passion and their dedication. And it's hard. And we really need to do everything we can to support them in their endeavours. Our policies and our strategies tend to be designed around large businesses. And when I say our, I mean in Europe, but also in our national member states. They're designed around large businesses, either to facilitate large businesses or to control them. So a good example of that is GDPR. Would we really have had GDPR if we didn't have the challenges around the large social media companies? But GDPR is a significant burden on smaller companies. Increasing regulation is difficult for all companies of every size. However, I'm not saying it's not important. It is important. But large companies can cope with it, and they can also lobby. Small companies don't have the capability to do that. Neither do medium-sized companies. So is it possible for us to have less onerous obligations on smaller companies? Can we adjust our regulation and our policies so that it's not the same obligation isn't on an SME as is on a larger company? In some cases, can we have exemptions, particularly for small companies? I know we have the SME test. Is it being used in all cases across member states, within Brussels, and is it working? I don't have the answer to that question. But SMEs are getting caught up in regulations designed to control larger companies. And I'll give two examples of this. One, undertaking in difficulty, or UID as it's known. So companies who are considered to be UID are companies with weak solvency. The issue is that early stage companies, particularly innovative companies who are investing a lot in R&D, are likely to have weak solvency. Because all of the money that they are generating, they're putting it into their R&D. All of the investments they're getting, they're putting it into their R&D. And if they are designated as UID, it prevents us from supporting them financially. Can we do something about that? The second one I'll mention is linked companies. So sometimes when an SME is linked to a larger company, we're inadvertently excluding them from support. So can we be a bit more understanding when we look at linked companies? Do we always have to say no? So my question that I was to answer was, how are SMEs doing? They're doing okay, thanks to their innovation, their passion, and their commitment. However, they could do a lot better if we channeled our energies into facilitating rather than creating barriers, and to look at our policies and supports through the eyes of an SME. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sticking so exactly to the time. I will pass on to Marco.
Brilliant. Marcus, if you don't mind, I'll stand up if that's okay. So Marco Forgione, I'm Director General at the Chartered Institute of Export and International Trade. We are an independent, not-for-profit organisation established in 1935. And the reason that's important is because the Chartered Institute was set up specifically to help and support UK businesses at the time to address the significant challenges of the interwar years of a flatlining economy and of really poor growth. So the Chartered Institute was established to help empower businesses to trade. Now, in the intervening 89 years, that mission is still embedded in us, but we are much more international. We work across the entirety of the supply chain, and we work across the entirety of global trade. That's imports and exports. And that's important, because if we want businesses to export, we need to have an import strategy. And if we have an import strategy, we want to have an export strategy. And one of the challenges that the United Kingdom has faced in recent years, of course, is for the first time in more than 3 generations, having to create its trade policy alone to establish an industrial strategy that addresses the complexities caused by Brexit and also the ongoing disruption of our fragile global supply chains. We exist, as I say, to encourage businesses to trade cross borders. And as Anne has said, the vast majority of MSMEs, micro, small and medium enterprises, don't trade cross borders. And the problem with that is that all the research shows and evidence proves that businesses which trade cross borders, businesses which trade internationally, are more sustainable, more resilient, they employ more people, they are more innovative, and they are more profitable. If we are to address the most significant challenges we face, whether that's economic development, whether that's health exclusion, whether that's societal change, whether that's environmental shifts, the only way we do that, as Anne has highlighted, is by taking down barriers and not by building them up. By encouraging, nurturing, supporting businesses to trade cross borders, to reap the benefits, the proven benefits of cross-border trade. And at a time when we are facing multi-generational challenges, it is incumbent on us to look at how we support those businesses, how we nurture a generation of entrepreneurs who see global trade as just a part of doing business. And the low productivity that is endemic in the United Kingdom, unfortunately, is a problem also within the EU. And as we seek now to try and redefine how global trade happens, if we seek now to forge partnerships which address the fact that the traditional free trade agreements, the perception of free trade, doesn't have the tools, doesn't have the answers to today's problems, we need to move to an era to the principles of trusted trade. And as partners, the United Kingdom with the EU, we are set the challenge of redefining that world of trusted trade so that we can address the disruption to global supply chains, to the fragility of our highly integrated, just-in-time manufacturing, of an environment where too many MSMEs don't have the opportunity, the tools, the rules, the regulations that enables them to engage in cross-border trade, as has been highlighted. When we have to look at the challenge of environmental change impacting not just global supply chains through the Panama Canal, but agricultural production here on mainland Europe, where we face the fact that we've got a new era of geopolitical tension, where the tectonic forces of the 2 largest economies in the world actually right now engaged in a trade war, and unfortunately something that is only going to scale up with the incoming presidency of Donald Trump already declaring that America, largest economy in the world, will be imposing trade tariffs, trade on goods from the EU, trade in goods from China, and with our integrated supply chains, the impact of that could be significant. So the opportunity now, the challenge now, is for us as collaborators to work together to define what trusted trade means and to give the power, the tools, the skills, the knowledge, the expertise, and the services to ensure that MSMEs seize the opportunities that global trade, international cross-border trade offers. And that's not just trade within the EU. That's about businesses in the EU looking globally for their markets, for their services and their products. And as a representative who supports trusted trade, although we are based in the UK, we are international in our outlook, I am determined to play a fulsome role to provide the support, the encouragement, the advice and the guidance to businesses wherever they are. And the particular challenges that businesses face if they are female-led businesses, if they are from marginalized communities. If we don't encourage those businesses, we limit the potential, not just for our economies, but for our societal development. The challenges that we face are immense, but because it's difficult or onerous is not a reason for us not to try. And as I finish here, I'll be heading to Brussels to work with colleagues in the European Parliament and in the Commission to explore how the proposed changes to the customs union can be implemented in a way that encourages and nurtures cross-border trade and those proven benefits for all businesses, but particularly for MSMEs, micro, small and medium enterprises, where international trade provides more resilience, more sustainability, more employment, more innovation, and most importantly, more profitability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco. Let's move on to Adrienne, if I can ask you. Yes, I'm sorry. Your presentation should show up soon, and here's you.
Thank you. Hello, so my name is Adrienne Berta. I'm prepared with some slides to show you who we are, what we do, and how we relate to the SMEs. EXIM is part of the institutional system of economic development. As you can see, we cover loan, capital, and guarantee needs of mainly SMEs. So we have Garantika and Startgarancia for guarantees. We have National Capital Holding, which provides capital investments also for SMEs, and we have two 100% state-owned banks. One of them is the Hungarian Development Bank, and the other one is EXIM, which basically is a union of a bank and an insurance. And obviously I would concentrate on EXIM, not just because of the topic, but also because of my role there. So it doesn't. Okay.
To the big button.
Sorry.
I have.
Could we? Sorry, Arno, could you help us with does it work?
So
okay.
This one, okay. We have several roles. Probably the most important one for today is the being an export credit agency. So we are about to facilitate SMEs and also large corporates for exporting. We have a very strong anti-cyclical role, which was important during the pandemic and even today due to the Ukrainian situation. So in these terms, we are kind of like crisis management. We are financing strategically important roles, which are important for the national government. And also we are supporting IFDR, financing for our national champions, financing their foreign investments. And back to the SMEs, or concentrating to the SMEs, EXIM has and always had a very strong relation and focus on SMEs. We believe that SMEs are probably the most important players of the economy. So historically, we have a strong portion in our portfolio. As you can see, in the last 15 years, we have like almost 80% cover the loans for SMEs. And last year, we launched a program which was in the amount of 2.9 billion euros, and really high percent, like 71% of the contract numbers went also to SMEs. In this program, the interest rate was very favorable, and it's really good to see that the development and the usage of money is really flourishing now. For this year, we are also participating in this Damian Shandor program, which is also will be green loans, investment loans, and leasing financing. And as being EXIM, we are always supporting SMEs who are already on export or they are about to get exports. Okay.
Thank you very much, Adrienne. Let's move on to our final speaker of the initial presentations, Natalia.
Perfect, thank you. I also have a presentation.
I'm sure it will show up.
I don't see it yet on the
second.
screen. Perhaps I start with a brief introduction in the meantime. So my name is Natalia Petrova, and I'm here to introduce you to the export credit pilot, which we have launched at the European Investment Fund in July this year. Okay, let me try. Perfect. It's working well. So perhaps just to give you a bit of a background also, you probably are all familiar with European Investment Fund, but it is part of the European Investment Bank Group. And the focus of the European Investment Fund is primarily we provide specialized financing solutions, mostly equity, debt, as well as securitization solutions, with primary focus to enhance access to finance and to fill in funding gaps for SMEs and mid-caps. Primary focus on SMEs. We actually celebrated 30 years earlier in this year, in June this year. However, the export credit pilot is a total novelty for us. It's the first time we are actually focusing on supporting export credit solutions. And now I focus a bit more on the export credit pilot. So shortly after beginning of the war in Ukraine, as you all know, the trade between EU and Ukraine plummeted. Based on this was also due to the high risk and unavailability of the export credit solutions to support this export and to provide insurance or guarantees for companies exporting to Ukraine. In this context, the European Commission reached out to European Investment Fund with the aim of finding a way of supporting this export and basically filling up a dual purpose of firstly supporting the export of European SMEs and small mid-caps, but at the same time also supporting Ukraine's recovery by providing necessary supplies and through imports. This pilot was developed in close cooperation with the main public facilitators of such export credit solutions, which are the export credit agencies, such as also EXIM or MEHIB, part of EXIM. And it was developed, firstly we started with questionnaires, but then also technical working groups to really ensure that this pilot is fit to needs of the export credit agencies. And there, perhaps it's also important to mention that the EIF, generally, we do not provide support, guarantees, equity, and so, directly to the SMEs or mid-caps, but we operate on intermediated model. So we operate through financial intermediaries, and when I say financial intermediaries or FIs, in this case of the export credit pilot, I mean export credit agencies. So, and I can move to the next slide where, if I still have a bit of time, where I can introduce you a bit on how exactly we do that. So we launched the pilot in July. Now we are receiving applications. So far the interest is very high. We already requested amounts for the coverage, guarantee coverage exceeds the available budget of the export credit pilot. We hope to be signing first deals early next year. The way this operates, so once the deal is signed, the EIF offers a counter guarantee, direct guarantee or counter guarantee on a portfolio of export credit solutions of the export credit agencies. These export credit solutions, just to give you a better idea of that, these are, you probably know, these can be either export credit guarantees or export credit insurances, such as the supplier's credit, and we are also developing it further, and hopefully the pilot soon will cover also buyer's credit. It also currently covers the export credit solutions in form of a confirmed letter of credit. The coverage rate under this pilot is exceptionally high. Compared to the usual guarantee products that we have, that we currently have, in particular under the InvestEU, which is the mandate under which the export credit pilot was developed and is being deployed. And we are offering basically up to 80% guarantee rate, so coverage of losses of the export credit agencies. And I said up to, because basically we give also the export credit agencies have the freedom then to decide if they want a lower coverage on a transaction-by-transaction basis, because then this is also linked to the remuneration which we are sharing pro rata. So in case they want a lower coverage on any specific transaction, which they include in their portfolio, we give them the freedom. This is really intermediated model, so we offer this overall guarantee or counter guarantee, and then they deploy it based on their own policies and preferences. I would perhaps mention, so they have 3 years to build this portfolio. Another novelty under this pilot is rather unusual for guarantee under in EIF is that also the minimum contractual maturity of the transaction is 1 month, and there is no maximum maturity. Also, if once any of this transaction fully matures, it can be re-included, and basically they can again originate transactions as long as the maximum coverage that we provide is within the limit that we have originally agreed with them. The coverage is provided in euro at the moment. Of course, they can include also, export credit agencies can also include transaction in other currencies. However, our coverage under the pilot is in euro. And I also included the link in case you want to learn more about it. I am also here available now for more questions, now during these sessions or after the session. But so far we are very happy to be receiving very positive response from export credit agencies, and look forward to deployment and to start of the inclusions early next year. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much to all of our members of the panel. We'll now move into the Q&A sessions. So, as I mentioned before, you can submit your questions through Slido, and I see there are already a couple of questions that have come in through Slido. Let me just give me a few seconds to read through the questions that have come in so far. Right. The first question is one that I believe is of particular relevance to Marco, who has mentioned the concept of trusted trade. So that we have a question from Evgenia Georgievska, whether SMEs in EU candidate countries can be part of trusted and free trade, considering how many funding opportunities are not available to non-EU member states. Marco may also be well placed to this from a different perspective as an ex-EU member state representative. But of course, I'll pass the floor to you, Marco, but if any of our other panelists would like to answer this question as well.
Thank you, Marcus. I won't go into the detail as to what funding is available from the EU to non-EU nations, because I think that wouldn't quite be appropriate. But I think the reality is that we as trading nations, trading blocs, have to recognize that the highly integrated global supply chain is no longer fit for purpose. And instead of being highly efficient yet highly fragile, we need to build resilience into our supply chains. And that means building partnerships and relationships under the principles of trusted trade. And we have the potential to deploy economic diplomacy in a really meaningful, supportive, nurturing way, and support that with the digitalization of trade, which provides greater clarity and assurance around trade flows, where you're able to share on a permission level the advanced supply chain information, talking specifically around trading goods here, to provide clarity and assurance. And what that means is that as a buyer or a vendor, you have greater assurance and security. As a provider of funds or an insurer of the trade, you too have greater assurance and visibility into the trade, which de-risks the trade, which means that the costs of the financing and the costs of the insurance can and should be reduced. And by the implementation, as I've said, of that economic diplomacy, where instead of trying to use free trade, in inverted commas, almost as a hammer with which to beat potential trading partners, we establish a resilient, trusted partnership to establish trade flows. And that way, we address some of the challenges of our fragile supply chains. We build resilience in nations, and we give greater clarity and support to enable all businesses, whatever size or scale, to access international trade. And I just saw there's specifically a question about Uzbekistan, and it's a nation that we've been working with as a Chartered Institute very closely. This is an opportunity to redefine geopolitically the engagement and flow of trade from Central Asia. And Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan and Tajikistan are very keen to build open trade flows with the EU and with other nations. That is something I wholeheartedly support. There are issues around standards and assurance, but with training, support, guidance, and a trusted trading partnership relationship, we can make significant changes and significant progress in building those resilient partnerships.
Thank you very much, Marco. Are there any other panelists that would like to come in on this question? If not, I'll move on to the next question, which I believe is one that has been touched upon also in our introductory session this morning, because there is the question, how can European SMEs effectively compete on a global scale against Asian products that now meet international quality standards, especially when European production costs are equal the sales prices of Asian goods? So I might pass the floor to Anne to answer this question first, but again, of course, if anybody else wishes to come in. So Anne, what is your perspective of what qualities do European SMEs have that allow them to compete with producers in cheaper countries?
So I think we have to be very careful here that companies don't try and compete on price alone, because that's just a race to the bottom. You bring your price lower, your competitors will bring their price lower again. It has to be something else. And I would say where European companies can really compete is on their innovation and on their adherence to very high standards around sustainability, for example, around labour laws, etc. So that's really where we need to focus. I would also say that sometimes a market isn't right for a company. We work with companies every day of the week, and sometimes they look at the world and say, okay, so there's 1.5 billion people in that market, that must be a good market for me. Just because there's lots of people in it doesn't mean it's a good market. So it's about market research to identify where are the right markets for your company. Where can you actually get a premium? Because let's face it, Europe is an expensive location to produce product. So where is the right location where you can actually sell your product at a premium because of all of the extra benefits that you bring, the stronger innovation, etc.
Thank you very much. I think those are very good points. Any of the other panelists wish to come in on this? Thanks very much. I see one question that is probably more for me as the representative of the European Commission on this panel. But again, if any of you would like to come in, so the question by Giorgio is, do you have an evaluation of the impact on EU GDP if SMEs would start to export more? So we don't have a full on a European Commission level, and I will also tomorrow present the SME performance review, which is our annual analysis of SME performance and the economic impact that SMEs have across the EU. We don't in there have a direct analysis of the impact on EU GDP. But what we certainly see is that European SMEs contribute more than half of the value added of and more than half of the EU's GDP. And exports are a key measure for SMEs to scale up, to grow, to create new jobs. And it also, of course, links very closely to their overall productivity. And we have seen that in comparison to large enterprises, SMEs' productivity has declined on a longer-term scale. So there is no question that the impact on EU GDP would be substantial if SMEs were exporting more. On the other hand, we also do have to be realistic. As Anne has just said, sometimes markets aren't necessarily right for every SME. Some SMEs will be perfectly happy and healthy and resilient SMEs staying within their own home market. But what the role for us as EU policymakers can certainly be to, at least at the European single market, but also for opportunities beyond the single market, to make it as easy as possible for those SMEs that wish to export to be able to engage in exports. Would any of you like to add any points to that?
I might just add that, you know, like I said, we kind of look out to these really big markets at the other side of the world, when actually we have a single market here in Europe, and we still haven't optimized that. SMEs haven't optimized the opportunities within the single market, and I think it's really important that we don't forget that. Sometimes your market is right on your doorstep.
Just to build on that point, the Chartered Institute, we did a piece of research. We chair the E-commerce Trade Commission, which is looking at how we can encourage MSMEs to use the marketplaces and online platforms as their first step to trading internationally, to trade cross borders, to overcome some of the challenges or perceived difficulties of trading cross borders. And we produced a report which identified that in the UK alone, there are 70,000 MSMEs who could right now be trading cross borders but aren't. And if we were able to get those 70,000 trading on an annual basis, that's about 9.3 billion additional revenue into the UK economy. So if you scale that to the MSMEs in the nations of the EU, trading more coherently with their partner nations within the EU, let alone trading internationally using e-commerce, the potential, the impact of that is huge. For not just the UK economy, but also for the societies who will be transformed by having those successful businesses amidst them.
Thank you very much, both Anne and Marco. I see there's a specific question for Natalia as well. Are there any limitations or conditions on the type of Ukrainian beneficiary that can benefit from the EIF pilot?
No, for now, for the importer, so basically actually the pilot also is currently under development. For the moment, we are supporting the supplier's credit as his eligible transaction to be included in the portfolio, as well as the confirm letter of credit. And there basically the primary focus of final recipient transaction is on the exporter. So the exporter needs to be a small mid-cap, SME or small mid-cap, based in the EU or other participating countries which currently under the pilot and the InvestEU program are Norway and Iceland. For the importer, it can be any Ukrainian SME. We are developing the pilot further, and the idea is that we would also eligible transaction to be covered under the pilot and included in the portfolio would be also buyer's credit, where of course the more focus would be on the buyer, but it should also remain the case, of course subject to final confirmation and of this development. It could also be any Ukrainian entity.
Thank you very much, Natalia. There are a number of other questions in Slido, but if you allow me, I'll first ask a question of my own, particularly to Adrienne, but again, others may wish to chime in. Adrienne, you have talked quite a lot about providing bank loan financing to SMEs, and I was wondering if you had any particular experiences on which areas or which particular types of investments SMEs come to you for, and where maybe it may be more difficult to find traditional financing. Would you have any insights on that?
Yeah, actually, in our portfolio you can find basically everything, but my favorites one are like production, so producing something. And back to this discussion, if I may, that yeah, exports, and we are supporting in each EXIM program. It's a positive thing if we can provide some to a company to a loan which is ready for export. But my big question, and it's always a question for myself, whether they are mature enough, whether they are ready to go either in Europe, to go to another continent. That's a totally different question, because from legal point of view, from economical point of view, from human resources point of view, that's a totally different culture. Even if you just go to Austria or Germany, it's not Hungary anymore. So I don't know whether you have any experience on this one, but for me it's always a big, like a red line a little bit, that be careful, and you have to be very, very careful. You have to go there, you have to do the market research, you have to do your homework before you go abroad. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. We have another question, a bit more general, on what are the most practical burdens on small businesses to start trade in the internal market. Adrienne, I see you nodding. If you've already outlined some points, but if you would like to add anything.
Probably for me, the market research, that's something. Then the legal environment, that's another important field which has to be familiar with that one. And again, human resources. You have to have people there. You cannot be there. Of course, online things helps a lot, but it's still not the same. So I think if I have to say three, I would pick these ones.
Anne, would you have something?
Yeah, I actually think on a very practical level, language is a big problem. Certainly in the internal market. We all speak different languages. I think Ireland is the only English-speaking country left. So that is very practically a barrier. Networks within the markets, and building a network, which is related to language in some ways, and understanding the marketplace, which can be addressed by market research. And I would say the other thing, which Adrienne referred to really, is time. So SMEs are time poor, and the more time they spend trying to align and adhere and comply with regulations, the less time they have to build their markets.
Thanks very much. Next, I think I'll group two questions because they are both directed at Marco and the concept of trusted trade. So the first question is, Marco talked about helping SMEs to better access international markets to enable business growth. Does he have a view on how best to facilitate this, given that SMEs don't have the resources of big businesses? And then a second question linked to this concept, whether there are any specific value chains that would be prioritized by trusted trade, i.e. strategic technologies or raw materials. Marco, if you'd like to answer that.
Sure. I think Adrienne and Anne have highlighted the challenges that MSMEs face. It's about time, it's about understanding the legal environment, the requirements of trading cross borders, assessing the potential risk, the perceived challenge of that trade, and then having a supply chain or a logistics support in order to move your goods across the borders or overseas. From the report we carried out, actually the second biggest challenge, and which is why I'm delighted to hear from Anna Adrienne, is actually access to finance for MSMEs to have the capital available to explore and develop new channels, new markets, as well as finding the time to do it. Because if if you're an owner-led business, the person who's considering new markets is also the person answering the phone, packing the stuff, sending the stuff out, and dealing with staffing issues. So we've got a very immediate problem, which is how do we support businesses as they are today to grow their cross-border trade, and there are practical supports from the EXIM organizations, the trade promotion agencies, and governments provide a huge amount of support, advice and guidance, both in market and in the domestic market. And then there's a longer term of how do we ensure that the next generation of entrepreneurs see cross-border trade or international trade just as a part of doing business, not as something that has complexity or difficulties. It's about your business growth strategy. And that bit is about getting to that next generation so that they feel comfortable understanding the global marketplace and at home trading in the global marketplace. And so there's two tiers of activity that are required. Practical, tactical activity right now, and governments are providing that help and support, and more needs to be done to make it relevant for MSMEs, and then that longer term behavior change that is required.
Thanks very much, Marco. I have another question, and it's been touched upon in the discussion so far already, related to digitalization and e-commerce, which of course has enabled a lot of companies that otherwise would not have been able to export to sell their goods to other markets and to other countries. At the same time, we've also seen that particularly online commerce has been dominated by a handful of very big platforms that don't necessarily offer the best opportunities or the best conditions for small enterprises. Do you have any experience from your areas of work whether SMEs see e-commerce and selling through large platforms more as a positive, or do they also talk about restrictions imposed on them? Just any impressions that you might have. Natalia, do you have any experience on this?
No, I think on this regard, I would just also perhaps add also something else that we do, because it's outside of the export credit pilot, but we also support innovation and digitalization. So we also provide and try to enhance access to finance in this regard at the EIF, and this is again together under the InvestEU. Well, now it's under InvestEU, but it's also a follow-up on previous mandated. Sorry, I think I'm moving this too much and it makes the background noise. On the predecessor programs with the European Commission, both on the equity side and on the guarantee side. So there we have a specific criteria under which the financial intermediaries can include financial support. So on the guarantee side, which I'm more focused on loans to SMEs or small mid-caps that want to invest into their digitalization generally. So I think that's what I would like to add here. Solutions are available there, at least for us, to support the SMEs and small mid-caps if they envisage to do so.
I can say something on that. Most of our members in Trade Promotion Europe do provide supports for their companies around digitalization and specifically focusing in on e-commerce. And it's an area in Trade Promotion Europe that we have a working group on. There is no doubt that for SMEs, using one of the larger platforms is quite burdensome and quite costly for them. It's not an easy thing to do, and it seems like it's easy, but I know quite a number of companies who have used the larger platforms and decided that they needed to come off them because it just wasn't working for them from a price perspective. And remember, just because you're working in e-commerce, that doesn't mean that you don't have to deliver your products. So if in my case, if you're based in Ireland and your customer is in Germany, even if they buy it off a platform, you still have to get the product to them. That means that actually, if you're really going to sell, you need to have a warehouse in Europe or in that country, and that's quite a significant burden for an SME. So it's not quite as simple as let's all digitalize and use e-commerce and that's it. And that's why our members are trying to support their companies in order to facilitate that trade.
Thank you very much. I see we have about 10 minutes left. There are 2 more questions on the Slido, so I will cover those 2 questions and then give the chance to everybody for a brief closing statement. So the first question is for Natalia. How do you see the role of the EIF in trading globally, in supporting SMEs for trading globally beyond the Ukraine pilot? Will you work more on this topic in the future as well?
Great, thank you. Thank you for this question. I think it's also a good way to do my closing remarks, probably. So this is really something new that we do, and we are happy to do. And now, after listening, to this panel, but also generally to the expert credit agencies who also voiced to us the concerns and needs of SMEs and small mid-caps, this is a pilot initiative. So we will need to take some lessons from it once there is a time. It was only launched now in July, but we see there is large interest. So as I mentioned before, we received so far 11 applications, so this is close to the half of the expert credit agencies who are eligible to apply under the pilot in the EU and the other participating countries. The interest is high, and I think this is as much as I can say. We clearly see there is a need, and we hope that the pilot will be successful and the uptake will be good, and there will be opportunities to build on that. And for it not to be pilot anymore, but to be part of the next mandate.
Thank you very much. And there is one other question, I believe more of a comment as well. Part of cross-border trade intra-EU is based on online trade, and they need postal or courier services. But in many border cities or villages, it is cheaper to send something to the other side of the country than to the neighboring city just on the other side of the border. So where is the single market here? I can, from a personal perspective, only share the sentiment. And there are certainly many areas, particularly in services, where there is still a lot of scope for deepening and completing the single market. But on the particular question of postal services, courier services, do any of you have any experiences with the ways SMEs manage to send things into other countries? And you already mentioned that very often you do actually need a warehouse in the other country rather than just being able to ship it to another country.
Yeah, and I think also our courier and postal services have actually improved dramatically since we've started to digitalize. But I would echo your view, Marcus, that we talk about the single market. It's not perfect yet. There are things we need to do. So it's great to have this highlighted as an issue that needs to be addressed.
Anybody else on this question? Otherwise, we have about 5 minutes left, so I would like to give each of our panelists the opportunity for a closing statement. Maybe we'll start the other way around. Natalia, if you would like to start with a closing statement, and then we move on.
Thank you very much. I think I already did my closing statement. I don't want to repeat myself, so I hope we will hear from one another on another occasion when hopefully we'll be launching, something even bigger. So for now, one thing I didn't mention is the pilot size is actually 300 million for the moment. It's given the 80% coverage, we are expecting to mobilize for the SMEs close to 400,000 million under the InvestEU program, under the pilot, and we certainly hope that this will lead to something bigger, and more support will be coming the way of SMEs.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Any closing words, Adrienne?
Yeah, I think we all agree that there is a huge potential in SMEs, and they need support. They have a long way to go yet to get there, but I think we will be here, and hopefully we can help them a lot, even next year.
Thank you. Marco?
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. I just want to say that actually there's cause for huge optimism. And I've really found, listening to my colleagues, heart warming and inspiring. You know, the fact that the Commission through EIF is actively providing funding and support to get liquidity into the marketplace, that we've got at a national level funding being provided and made available, that across Europe we've got the advisory services supporting, encouraging and engaging with MSMEs, that actually the reason why the Chartered Institute was set up in 1935 will soon, hopefully, no longer be relevant or required when businesses, wherever they are taking the opportunities that exist for cross-border trade with the help and support of the EU institutions, the national institutions, and the pan-national engagement communities that are developing. So things aren't perfect. There is a lot to do, but an awful lot has been achieved. So I'm leaving today really inspired about the potential that there is for MSMEs in the EU to reap the benefits of cross-border trade. And the fact that such an event as today is taking place is even further evidence of what great progress has been made.
Thanks very much, Marco. Anne, I give you the last statement.
Yeah, maybe two things. First of all, I'll go back to the question that I was asked at the beginning around how do European SMEs compete with competition from the other side of the world. And, you know, thinking about specifically in the single market, if SMEs are competing with companies from far away within the single market who are coming in at lower prices, I do think that sustainability is one of the key areas where we can compete. Remember, if the product is manufactured and sold in Europe, well then it hasn't travelled across the world. And when we think about climate change and sustainability, that's a really important point. And I think we need to start focusing on that. I would also say, you know, we are very strong in Trade Promotion Europe, trying to ensure that regulation and obligations on SMEs is not too harsh. However, we should also take advantage of the fact that we do have strong regulation in Europe and use that as a selling point with our products. And then the second point I would make is, at the heart of most SMEs is the ambition to be a really big company. And let's face it, in Europe, we don't have enough really big companies. So if you're an SME, you know, I really commend you for your ambition and your hard work. Keep going. We will do what we can to help you because you are doing a brilliant job. And for the policymakers in the room, I would say, let's try and help these SMEs to achieve their ambition to be larger companies, which will be better for all of us.
Thank you very much. I was about to invite everybody to give a big round of applause to our panelists, but the audience has been even quicker than me. So thanks also from my side to everybody for your inspiring speeches, for all the experiences you bring. And thanks very much to the audience for your interest and your questions. I'm sure there will still be further discussions on this topic. This is, of course, an issue that will touch upon many of the other panels as well. So I'll be very curious to see more exchanges and more discussions with our panelists, with you in the breaks and in the networking lunches. So thanks very much again for coming, and looking forward to seeing you at some of the other panels as well.
Thank you to all our speakers and for a fascinating session, and for you for participating. Now it's time for the networking lunch break, where, as well as a delicious Hungarian feast, we have 3 Meet the Expert sessions for you to choose from, alongside the Expo and Ideas Lounge. And for the history lovers amongst you, there will be a guided tour of the Hall of the Great War and Hall of the Modern Armed Forces on level 0 at 1:30 p.m. Please be sure to be back in your seats by 2 p.m. and here in the plenary room there will be a participatory workshop entitled The Challenges and Opportunities of Extreme Weather for SMEs. In the Akházi room we'll have a policy workshop on open strategic autonomy, what's in it for SMEs. The Pálfi room will feature a policy workshop on stress testing for better regulation, and the Hadik room will explore empowering women in business. Jó étvágyat, bon appétit. Thank you for your attention.